I welcome our speaker, Abraham Mamela, the CEO and founder of Infers Group, which is the knowledge management and public engagement company in Botswana. Abraham is also a Wellcome Engagement Fellow and has spent time exploring how sustainable ecosystems can advance science and society. He has been in the business of science communication and is an engagement practitioner for almost a decade now. During his period, he has led and worked on global and international projects in partnership with scientists, creative communities, and other engagement practitioners. He continues to work with international scientists to explore sustainable ecosystems that can advance science and bring mutual benefits to people outside science. Over to you, Abraham.
I would like to, first of all, maybe present to you about two projects. Firstly, I'll be more detailed about the first project, Genome Adventures, and secondly, I will be in past just brush through about the second project that we worked on, which is Art in Health and Impact, which was within 3 countries. Now, like I said, these two projects were funded by Wellcome Trust. Mostly, the Genome Adventures project was founded by the Wellcome Trust, and later on by NIH, and the Art in Health for Impact was funded by Wellcome Trust solely. Genome Adventures was a community engagement initiative based on the Collaborative African Genomics Network, which we call CAFGEN. And CAFGEN is a member of the Human Hereditary and Health in Africa, which is a consortium which is abbreviated H3 Africa, which focuses more on sequencing genetics in Africa. And now the CAFGEN project is hosted by Botswana Baylor Children's Clinic here. So in 2014, I approached the Botswana Baylor Children's Clinic as an independent engagement practitioner to collaborate on this Genome Adventures project within an existing project inside Baylor. The aim really was to explore ways in which you could utilize different tools to engage science, and to be specific on this one, genetics or genomics. And we utilize workshops, educational comics, social media, of course, in partnership with communities, media practitioners, policymakers, and the general public. And most interestingly, young people. As you know, they're the ones that love comics. And some within those young people, there were patients who live with HIV. Solely because the Baylor Children's Clinic works on health, explores work on science, health, and assisting or working with children with HIV and TB and many others, and cancer and all. It's a center of excellence. So we published 4 books based on genomics, and we collaborated with artists, biomedical scientists, the central advisors, the community advisory board, some social media schools, and all that. So it was more, the way we worked was more like a collaborative process, which engaged these people, artists, creative people, young people, medical scientists, practitioners, of course, the advisory board, policymakers, and all that. The idea was to have at least something that could achieve a shared value in the end. As you know, they say science is not just the end, it's the process. And I like comparing these two, science and art, to be the same. It's just that the other one works in a form of process that is more like fine sliced, and it's more procedural. And art, on the other side, is more like it's about winging. It's about winging things and finding what works best and what touches most, what touches the people's perspectives mostly. And as they say, art is an imitation of life, which to me, science and art can coexist, and they find a point in which they can actually coexist. And in the end, they achieve things that are new and that are noble and that are appreciated by people. So for that, I find them to be similar. It's just that the methodology of achieving work is different. The ideation process that we worked on within this project was more like a back and forth. We created, we brought in the concept, and I know, like in most cases engagement, it is advised that you start with the community that you are with to pitch for a proposal, which is more complex, by the way, and also it depends on the resources. Now, with this project, we kind of introduce the idea of comics simply because the Baylor Pediatric Clinic was working with Children's Clinic. And we thought about how could we bring more other audiences to be more interested in this. And we came up with different tools. And the ideation process in this, we kind of pitched the idea of comics alone. And then the concept itself was more like built by different people or groups, which included, there's a teen club that exists within the Baylor Children's Clinic. There are doctors, there are schools that we went out to consult, medical scientists, the media, of course, community advisory board, which is more like, it was more like the oversight of whatever that we are doing. And it continues to be the oversight, not only on the engagement side, but also on the project. So it was more like a back and forth process. We could find ourselves building a script, consulting with all these stakeholders, and social media, of course, which was more interesting. And at that point, we're looking at maybe running promotions, and I'll explain in this part. So here, we kind of, like I said, the creative process was more like an iterative, co-creative process, where we went back and forth to research, to researchers, and to the community, to the teams, before we finalize every little detail about the project. And the capacity building workshops were more helpful because they were kind of fun ways of kind of breaking the ice and making sure that young people or youth within those who were involved in the project didn't see the project or the science intimidating. And as you know, science itself, that those who feel like it's not for them. And for that reason, we came up with capacity building workshops where we broke down everything about genetics. And after that, they were more comfortable to be involved in the process, where scripting was involved. And with the scripting, of course, you can imagine, we had to take every little step by step as a consultative process, and mostly thinking about the cultural sensitivities, coming up with analogies that would simplify the concept, and character development. And in character development, we had to look in our society and look at or imitate certain role models that are known to our communities or society, so that whatever they are reading is something that hooks to what is existing already. And from, of course, the scripting also went to the level of engaging schools, different schools who were part of the process, also to kind of normalize or being sensitive about cultures. There are certain things that, with the art can be as crazy as possible, but because we are working on a sensitive project, we have to kind of be consultative in the whole process. And also we made sure that there are norms and values that are intertwined within the whole process. And we also, along the project at the same time, ran promotions, like we would run a promotion on social media about character development to find out who people loved before we even finalize the character and all that. And we found ourselves sometimes in trouble with the community advisory board to kind of say, no, I think you need to remove that culture or curb a few things about that. And also when it came to policy makers, it wasn't more as consultative as with other stakeholders. With them, it was more like an endorsement. Like every book had ministers, different ministers from ministries endorsing it and writing the foreword, which was more like something to also a tactic to kind of push it into the policy or into the to be adopted by schools and all. And for that, it made our lives easier because every time we went to schools, whoever who would see the comic book, the headmaster, they would realize, no, at least the government has accepted it, so we would not have a challenge. So which are more like the elements that you have to think about when you are engaging the public on creative processes. Sorry. Yes. Just to give you, I spoke earlier about analogies. We co-created a situation where we would simplify things for our audiences. And if you look into this is more like inside a cell. So we really made analogies about how an inside of a cell would look like things like mitochondria would liken them to a power plant, and the lysosome would liken them to a recycling plant. And all these things made it simpler and easier to young adults every time they engage with the books. Actually, that was the feedback that we got every time we visited schools. And those who actually didn't understand genomics or genetics, they actually expressed that they understand the subject matter much better compared to initially. Sorry. So now, to quickly talk about the impact of the project, the immediate outputs of this were like 4 comic books, as I mentioned, which was translated into 9 languages in Southern Africa, East Africa, and West Africa. And you can imagine that would be all the languages: Arabic, French, Hausa, Luganda, Tswana, and recently there's been Swaziland or Eswatini that's translated the book into Siswati. And like I said, to be honest, this book, I worked on this project like in 2015. It's been years, but to date, I still have a lot of people calling me to say, can you come and talk about this? And can we use your book to as a learning tool? And the outcomes that are known now would be, it continues to be a benchmark in the continent and outside the continent. And like I said, I keep being contacted by different people when they want to put it in their library and they want to use it as a benchmark for their project. And I remember there was a time when it was utilized as a teaching tool in one of ethics classes at Stanford. And this was an interesting one because someone brought an interesting perspective to this by saying, look, are you not maybe coercing students or young children or young people within the project or to participate within the project using the book? Which was more interesting, was something that I didn't see myself. However, we tried by all means to explain to the participants that if they wanted to be part of the project or not, it was entirely up to them. And to me, it was bringing an interesting engagement, an interesting argument, which is the reason why we have to do this. Because engagement doesn't have to be always positive, always either positive or negative. And that is what is about triggering dialogue. There's still some things that we could never talk about. We have the opportunity to talk about. And it inspired many comic books in science engagement in Africa. And there's been some scholarly work that has been published about this project. And lastly, I'll just brush through this one because it was also a science art project, which kind of carried similar processes. But this one was an international collaborative engagement project between Botswana, South Africa, India, and in affiliation with the Wellcome Trust, the Wellcome DBT India Alliance. The project was meant to explore mental health through street art. And the idea really here was to say, look, for street artists, they have an interesting perspective to life. And I'm sure you probably have seen several and many street art works. And they keep challenging your brain because for some reason, or you're provoking your mind. For some reason, you could find a street artwork, and many of us could have many or several ideas about that work, which is the idea, to kind of trigger dialogue and provoke thinking in different ways for different people. So this was more like I said, it engaged India, South Africa, Botswana, and it was really an interesting project, which has got many learnings as well. Likewise, it engaged workshops, art residencies, and public installations. It was quite a simple, linear project. What we did with artists here, we kind of immersed them in the environment of artists, and vice versa, and put in the environment of scientists, and vice versa. We place scientists in the environment of artists to kind of learn about each other. Because I kind of believe that when you bring different people in the same space, it kind of triggers different ideas and cross-pollinates ideas into, and as a result, in the end, you have interesting outputs for whatever project they are doing. So whatever that came out of the art residencies became a public installation. Before I say thank you, I wanted to show you maybe quickly some. I think you might have, you might take some time to, I'm not sure if you can see this. Please take time to go through these books for Genome Adventures. But I wish I had enough time to kind of take you through this. But here, the first book we wanted to take, where we focus more on the historical background of genes in the context of Africa, Botswana, before we jumped into the science, which is more like at least bringing audiences from a point of familiarity to unfamiliar. And the second book, we focused on, let me know if I'm running out of time. The second book was more like on cracking the code. We call it cracking the code. It was more like really jumping into the science itself, where we have to learn about the helix and all that. So we kind of took the characters through the labs and all that, and eventually draw some magic, something that can be interesting to young people. And also the characters, as I mentioned earlier, there were people who imitate things that are known, and they could teleport, have superpowers and all that, and they could just, I don't know if you know the magic school bus, something, these characters could actually be reduced to a microscopic level, to a point where they will be the size of a cell and get injected inside a body. And the third book was more like the relationship between genetics and health. And the fourth book was focused on more like what now? It's more like genetics and policy, research and policy. So it was more like giving hope. I think I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abraham, for sharing your work with us. Looks really interesting, and I'm now intrigued to go and explore the books myself.